Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Unpopular View.
Thank you all for clicking on our faces.
New flag with all that.
Okay, so I wrote down some notes.
Let's do that. I don't want to sit too hard. That's twice. That'll probably go over about as well as Colonel Division.
Because there was no Jay White site.
Okay, just straight up gangbanging. This story has been fit. You gotta pay attention.
So Unpopular Review does not. What is she the CEO of, Chris? Jesus, golly. Let's start the show.
Welcome, wrestling fans all around the world. Guys, girls, all generations, all genders, all colors, all creeds. Welcome to Unpopular Review Wrestling as we discuss the biggest thing in wrestling right now, that is the Mr. McMahon Netflix documentary. We're going to dive into this, give our thoughts, our opinions through each and every single episode, and then, just dive into this. Let's discuss this. And today, joining me, I am your host, Mike Knox. I'll be the MC of this event. Yes, it's an event because we're talking about the greatest promoter in sports history, not just professional wrestling. That is Mr. Vincent Kennedy McMahon. And we all will have our thoughts and our opinions. And said thoughts and opinions of each individual belongs to said individual and does not represent Unpopular Review Wrestling or entertainment in totality. I am joined also today by a head member of the AEW crew, the greatest cheesesteaks in Orlando, Venomous Vincent LaSpada. How you doing, Vincent? Think you're muted? There you go. You're unmuted now.
I said how everybody's doing today.
Great. Great to have you here. Also join a rarity for myself and him to be on the screen at the same time from New York City, Big Daddy Cool of UPR Shorts. What's going on, you Big Daddy Cool?
What's going on, Mike? What's going on, gentlemen? Happy to be here. Let's talk about my pops, Vincent Kennedy McMahon.
And also, guys, the fearless leaders he's been deemed lately, but what is he exactly leading if we're not being headed in the right direction towards financial gain? But he's still our executive consultant, and he is the mouth of Unpopular Review, not the ass that belongs to the Grand Poobah champion Jack himself, but we are joined by the executive consultant. What's going on, executive?
Man, let me tell you something. Life is good. I missed karaoke last night. That pissed me off. Some jabroni, some J-Bron thought he could beat me in basketball. And I had a great sub. It's been an interesting 24 hours to me. Interesting 24 hours. But 72 hours ago, I got to watch a documentary with a man who's responsible, really, and this is not me glorifying him. We'll talk more about this later. But really, let's be honest. He's responsible for a lot of us being friends today, right? Indirectly. He doesn't know who the fuck we are, right? And apparently from this documentary, I didn't know who the fuck he was. But we are here to discuss him. And as you can see, all five of us here, myself, Mike Knox, Venomous Vincent, Dog Walker himself, and Big Daddy Cool from UPR Shorts, which will be out again because we have a lot of content that I have to get out. I don't know what's going on with me. Anyway, let's talk.
Today, we are going to talk about the Vincent Kennedy McMahon Netflix documentary that was actually filmed before the allegations that recently have come out about him and the sexual improprieties of his career. But this documentary was being put together for the first time ever, where we got to actually hear from Vincent's mouth, Mr. McMahon's mouth, his opinions of certain situations that happened throughout his career. Most wrestling fans will have you tell you that there's nothing new about this in this documentary. There's nothing new that we did not know. I would say, as an MC of this panel today, I would agree with that. It's not that we didn't know these things. Maybe some of the intimate details of the situations from Vincent's perspective, I don't think people knew. So when wrestling fans around the world say, oh, we knew all this. Yes, we did, but it wasn't too shocking to us. So outside of wrestling fans who are also watching this thing, they're the ones that are maybe shocked and appalled or have their opinions about this. But wrestling fans, we've known this. We've also said time and time again, that's why I love this panel. We have a white American, a black American, a Latin American, and we all can see the different spectrums of professional wrestling in itself have no color involved. I know as a black wrestling fan, we will say wrestling's racist at this point. You got Swerve Strickland out there saying, oh, they're just mad because I'm a black man getting a contract. No, it's business. And this is a business, and this man ran the business. And we're going to talk about that business and that perspective. And it started off with episode 1, which I thought was absolutely hilarious that they actually titled it episode 1. I thought that was pretty interesting. And that first episode dives into Vince McMahon and following his father's footsteps into the family business, wanting to become an independent wrestling owner himself, and also some things that I personally, as a wrestling fan, did not know, some abuse from his father. So I'm going to start off with you, Venomous Vinnie. Your thoughts on episode 1, the Vince McMahon documentary?
Well, can you hear me? Well, I think it was titled Junior, wasn't it? They all had their own titles. Yeah. So I really enjoyed this. I know you said in the beginning of the show that there was a lot of stuff that actual wrestling fans knew about Vince. There was a lot of stuff that I actually did not know about Vince. And maybe we've all have heard it in the past, but can't remember everything. I didn't know that Vince grew up poor, which to me was shocking because maybe knowing that his father was, a big promoter in the South. I didn't know that he didn't know his father till he's 12. I had no idea about that. And then one thing that I know I talked to Chris about, Chris said he knew about it, which I didn't know. I didn't know that he had to pay his father in 3 payments, and nobody believed that he was going to do it, which was interesting. I think the first episode was great, introducing who Vince was, how he grew up, and it talked about financing, his when he actually took over the company, he pretty much mortgaged his house to put on WrestleMania 1, which I knew that, but I didn't know the sincerity of them potentially losing it all on this one actual deal. So I'm glad they started with something that really hit home to a lot of people. I mean, there's probably a lot of people out there that don't that grew up in the same predicament as Vince McMahon, and I really enjoyed episode 1.
Big Daddy Cool, your thoughts, and I'm with you, Vinny, on that. I also thought as a wrestling fan, and I believe think that I know a lot. We are so bottled down with so much information. I didn't know a lot of those things. Big Daddy Cool?
Episode 1 was the best episode out of the 6. Vince, you might not know, he tweeted out, or his people tweeted out before this came out on Wednesday, that this was a hit piece. And for most of it, it is a hit piece. It's the same retreaded garbage that we've seen on Dark Side of the Ring. A bunch of podcasts have spun off because of this stuff. And yeah, I get it. The problem is, for the first time ever, you got Vince McMahon talking in his own words. And here was an opportunity to get this man to tell you the story. In episode 1, titled Junior, by the way, that's a dig at him. He hates being called Junior. So that's another dig. This was the best episode because you get Vince's story. You get his upbringing. You get the turmoil between him and his dad. And the fact that this man, Vinnie Sr., was out of his life. And this man, wanted to be this guy. He emulated his pops that was never in his life. And you get Vince a little bit emotional about that. This dude, he never appreciated me, never said he was proud of me until the day he died. That's what I wanted to see. And that first episode, that's the only episode you get pretty much a raw Vince McMahon. I wanted to see Vince McMahon from the Undertaker documentary where he's crying, emotional. I wanted to see that. I wanted to see the Vince McMahon that everybody says he's like a father figure to me. John Cena, Steve Austin, Undertaker, all these guys, all these legends talk about Vince. He's a dad to me. I wanted to hear those stories. I didn't get that in these 6 episodes.
Looking at it, and you're right. I don't know why. I mean, I'll go back and look. It was called Junior, right? But when you go to the Netflix, library, it just says episode 1. I thought you're right. I thought it was called Junior, right? And I would echo that part of your conversation as we did not know these stories. We do not hear Vince get to speak. That first episode, it does lend you to understand in later episodes, especially like family business and things like that we're going to talk about, why he was the way that he was, and his family. It's always people forget it's a song. It says, America, this is how you made me. Right. So he's an influence of his household, and that's how he was brought up and brought into the world. And that's what we got. And executive consultant, your takes on episode 1, Junior.
Yeah, I don't remember it, but from what y'all have just said to me, I think this is the episode where he talks about his overall upbringing. Yeah, I remember Vinnie and I had that conversation before he had to walk his dogs. He and I had a conversation about him.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. So it was a forgettable episode? Is that what you don't remember? It was
no. It was just
ago.
I watched. I literally crammed. I know a lot of people do the thing.
Most wrestling fans got all episodes in the first day.
Yeah, but most wrestling fans are. I'll say wrestling fans, and people know what I mean by that. So I have life, so I don't remember everything, but I do. So I don't remember everything that happened every episode. So that's why I request to go last in each and every single one. And this is not normal. Chris just won't go last, so he can go pick. I just want to have try to remember. Even I could pull up what happened. Anyway, long story short, I did know about Vince McMahon trying to buy the WWE and bought it for I believe it was $1 million. He had to pay in 3 payments. They had the deal. What I did not know was that Gorilla Monsoon was the one that they were going to sell it to originally. That I had no idea until 2024. 3 days ago, 2024. So that's amazing to me, because then I think about it, and this is the main thing I get out of the episode. I already knew about him not being inspired till he's 12. I knew about the abuse. He's a fighter. And actually, there was also, he alluded to a few times about the sexual abuse that he got from his mother. So when you think about some of the stuff that he had his upbringing, most of the time when I'm talking about things that I talk about from a psychological point of view, a lot of things that happen to you later in life is because what stems from you as a child. So we'll talk about that a little bit later, right? But how much different do you think the WWE would look if Gorilla Monsoon would have been the one to purchase WWE? It will be a completely
take to get to a center
different feel.
Truth be told, I don't think the world will never know. I don't think it's fair.
Oh, definitely not.
I don't think it's fair to even play the game if that Gorilla would have failed or not. I don't think that's fair. We got what we got, and we got Vince, and the rest is history.
I'm not exactly sure.
I think anybody else taking over WWE other than Vince McMahon, it would have failed. We wouldn't be having this podcast right here. Vince, from episode 1, he gives you the vision. Everybody else, there were so many territories, and they were all doing the same thing, and they were all popular in their own right, but they were doing like this indie bullshit that you still see today, and that's the difference. That Vince had a vision. Vince had a vision to be global. I need emotion in these stories. I need it to just not be this country bumpkin versus this country bumpkin. I need it to be a bigger story. I want a movie in the ring. I want characters that are larger than life. And that's the difference. He had a vision of not just my territory, but the United States and eventually the world. And he executed. That's why he should be lauded. He's the modern day Walt Disney.
And that takes us right into episode 2, Heat. In the real world, wrestling superstars and storylines, plus Vince McMahon's retribution, and attacks on scandals and in the media, and a new competitor rises up in episode 2. Venomous Vinnie, I know this is probably episode I can see over there getting your notes together. This is reputation. Yeah, your take on this.
Well, I'm gonna tell you what. I was very intrigued by the beginning of this episode because I knew it happened. I have never seen the whole I didn't see almost the whole performance. I've never seen the full performance with Vince singing and like George Animal still hitting himself over the head with a tambourine. Hulk Hogan playing the bass guitar. I've seen clips of it, but I've never actually heard the full performance of Vince. I gotta say, it didn't make sense to me. Like that whole thing that he did, I can't grasp that. That was real quick before I go on. Was that part of his talk show that he did?
TNT.
Was that on that
talk show that he used to
have.
The
dancing? The dancing was from the first Slammies.
Yeah, the first Slammy Awards, but it extended off of the show, off of the
TNT show. So he did that at Slammies. Okay, all right.
And they wasn't playing instruments, by the way, Vinny. They were.
Oh, pretending.
Yes.
Pretending. Yeah.
Yes.
I really like
The
this
man
one.
really knew how to play a saxophone.
Yeah, they were like,
And George hitting himself with that tambourine. That's a
that
skill.
might have been real. It ain't hard to beat the tambourine. I mean, Eve told him, get your tambourine, go get your mellow whistling. So it's not hard to play the tambourine.
They talked a lot about Andre, which they didn't really get into too many details about his life. I like the fact that they, acknowledged that, Andre stepped away for a while to go make a movie, and he was pretty much done. He wasn't going to do anything, and they brought him back for WrestleMania 3, which we all know, the slam around the world. But it also talked about the alleged steroid use in 1984 with the company, and I can't get the Dr. George. Did somebody help me out with the last name of the doctor who alleged?
Zaharian.
There you go, Zaharian, who provided for the next 5 years the steroids and drugs for the WWF. Now, I wish they would have gone. I know there's so much you can do in the documentary, but I wish they would maybe elaborate more on that, because it did say that there was a lawsuit and things like that. But there's always another side of the story to what happens, and I feel like there's way more to it than what they explain. They also talked about the Click, which we all know about the Click. We all know that pretty much changed the wrestling world. To know that the bad guys and the good guys are all friends behind the scenes. What I did not know was, which probably people are going to go, how did you not know that? But what I did not know that it messed up everything for Triple H to win the King of the Ring, which I didn't know he got suspended for, and Stone Cold actually took his place.
Yeah, you got punished.
Huh?
Yeah, you got punished.
Yeah, he got punished. I like the fact that they talked about the one thing that really stood out to me, which I don't remember if it was episode 2 or episode 3, but I think they coincided with each other. I like the fact that in the 84 and 85, Vince tried to take over all the territories by going into them, which his father never wanted him to do. He thought that was a no-no. But little to say, he did well with that. And he started taking all the. I like the fact they started showing the stars from all the other companies, and then showing them in WWF. And then, what was very comical to me was that there was a video of Vince being sat down as an interview back in the 80s, saying that he was pretty much bitching that he was getting done to him with WCW, and I was losing my shit going, how are you going to sit here and bitch about it when you're doing the same exact thing to all these companies? You stole all their stars.
Well, that's interrupt you there, Vinny. That's 2 episodes from now. We're going to have episode 4 in the Attitude Era and all that stuff start to take place. I'm going to just curve your thoughts on that part right there. Okay. But, and definitely though, the steroid situation and something that I thought my wife pointed out, right? We know that wrestling is predetermined, right? Why they're coming at him for steroids if they consider that it's not being real. They call wrestling fake. Then why is the athletic commission upset that someone uses steroids? And you have the blurred lines of reality and perception. Was I selling them steroids? No, he was not. Did he know they had steroids in them? Yes, he did. He took steroids. As he describes it in his own words, that was the 80s back then, right? Stallone, Arnold, you name it. If you're a big 80s action star, you had to dress the part and look the part for that reason. But again, I think that's what people understand. He didn't go to trial because his wrestler was on steroids. He said he knew they were on steroids. He was on them too. The trial was that he was the one distributing their steroids to them, and that's where he beat the case. Big Daddy Cool, your takes on episode 2, Heat.
I want to say that throughout the first 2 episodes, I really enjoy watching Vince McMahon describe all these wrestling terms, because he hates to do that. He hates opening the curtain, pulling the curtain back. He's such a carny in that fashion. He's just like, you can see like when he's trying to describe what a baby face is and what a heel is, like he's like squirming like, oh, I fucking dread all this. And same thing with Heat, right? Like, he gets a lot of heat. This is why the episode's entitled this, right? He gets a lot of heat from all places. Mushnick, what is it? A New York Post writer. He was vicious. Still to this day, he has a personal vendetta against Vince. It's so obvious. The steroid trial becomes a thing because the feds knew that they needed to slow Vince down or stop him because there was so much heat on the company, right? The Ring Boy scandal, the alleged rape allegation from Rita Chatterton, and the steroids was really the only thing they could try and pin him on. It's very much how like they got Al Capone on tax evasion, right? They couldn't get him on anything else. They were like, "You're beat. You didn't pay your taxes." This is the same stunt, and I thought it was, I like the story of. I think we kind of glossed over a little bit of the territory fight. This man was unscrupulous. His dad was like, "Oh, don't go after these business partners." He was like, "Screw this. I'm going to go after him." This was business. And I love later on in the other episodes, you're going to hear him be like, "I'm just an innocent victim. Why are they coming after me?" This was the start of it, right? "Oh my God, I'm just a family business." Come on, Vince. Come on. You can't have it both ways.
I'm just gonna go ahead because Mike can't hear his voice. But
No, I was saying, I'm sorry. I know I had to double
that's
mute on. But yeah, go right ahead. Yeah, and I was saying, you hear later on, he was complaining that it was illegal, but that's exactly what he did. It was good business when he did it for good business, but when they did it to him, it was highway robbery. Second consultant, your take?
He. Vince did go after what?
I'm gonna read it to you again.
Yeah. Oh no, it's cool. It's cool. Let's see. All WCW one day the Warrior was the first champions after Hogan. Okay, so was this the one where Hogan tried to take over the show and was like,
Yes.
"Yeah, I was the man," all this other stuff. Hey, I remember an argument we were having, and not argument, it was a discussion where somebody was like, "Oh, Rocky was bigger than Godfather, or not bigger than Godfather."
That was in our chat. I thought that was a stupid conversation because Rocky is the biggest thing in American culture, amongst one of the biggest things in America's cinematography history.
So is Godfather, but Rocky's bigger.
And Godfather is not higher than Rocky because there's 3 Godfather movies to 10 Rocky movies. Rocky.
I thought it was very telling how Hogan was talking about Vince, but still putting himself over at the same time.
Very much.
It was amazing to me. Vince was, trust me, he was giving Vince a lot of credit, but you could see the workings of Vince McMahon, and it was a brilliant assessment. He wanted Dusty Rhodes, right? I wish they told that part of the story, Cody Rhodes. They wanted Dusty Rhodes. Dusty Rhodes wasn't ready. So if this documentary came out before 2-3 years ago, would we have been as empathetic to Cody Rhodes' story? It needed to be finished. Because Dusty was going to be that guy. This was in episode 2, right? Wasn't episode 1? Yeah, Dusty was going to be that guy. He turned it down. He couldn't handle the pressure. Hogan could.
I think Chris, sorry to interrupt here, but I think Dusty turned it down because he didn't believe in Vince's vision.
And the vision of the territories taking over. Yes,
right.
It wasn't about
he's kicking himself now.
Job. It wasn't that you're trying to take a dig at Dusty, and I'm not going to.
I am taking a dig at Dusty.
MC.
Yeah, I'm going to take a dig
at Dusty.
I ain't going to take a dig at Dusty.
Huh?
He couldn't handle it. I'm going to take a dig at Dusty.
That's not true. You don't know that.
He absolutely could not handle it.
That's false.
That's
an
not
opinion
false.
that you have no idea that's true or not.
Yeah, you have no idea that it's not true.
You do. Yes, you do. Because they tell you the story. You cannot.
Here's the story. I wanted Dusty to do it. Dusty turned it down.
MC.
Just a second. I'm telling you what happened.
Okay.
I'm telling you what happened.
You can't. I'm going to mute you. MC. I did.
Listen. We're not going to mute me. Go ahead.
Okay. You cannot take a story that we're reading. If you read right now on the screen, it says Mike Knox. You can't say, "Oh, that's not Mike Knox," or I'm gonna spell it with 1 X because I choose the one to spell it that way. No, I spell it that way. That's how it's spelled. In the documentary, it didn't say anything about him not being able to handle the pressure. It didn't even take, even though I leaned to what Big Daddy Cool's opinion is as well, as far as he didn't believe in the vision. They did hint towards that in the documentary, that Dusty didn't believe in it. They didn't say anything about Dusty couldn't do it or Dusty felt he wasn't the man to lead the generation. It said he did not believe in it. So you can't take your perspective to make it something that's not true. That's all I'm
Just a second. Was he offered a position? He turned it down.
We don't know if he was offered
Just
the
a
position.
second. Just a second. Did
We
Vince
don't
not
know.
want
We
him?
do
Did
not
Vince
know.
not want him to do it?
We do. You answer. I
Just-
asked you the question. You
Go
can't.
ahead.
You can't. You can rephrase it.
Just a second.
It's not going
Did
to change.
Vince want
We
to do
do
it?
not
Yes.
know. It does
He
not.
said it in the
It does not
documentary.
specify.
He said it in the documentary. He said, "I
It does
wanted
not
it to be
specify in the
Dusty."
documentary. You do not remember because you did not
Just a
watch it all the way
second.
through.
Just a second.
You
Venomous
have a
Vincent.
life, you
Venomous-
said, right?
Venomous-
It did
Venomous
not
Vincent.
say that
Vincent,
in the
did you hear-
documentary.
Just a second. Vincent, I'm asking you a question. Did you hear them say that they wanted Dusty to be the man?
They wanted him to be the main guy.
Right. Just a second. Big Daddy Cool. Did they want Vince want Dusty to be that guy?
He says he thought about Dusty.
That's what he said.
And
He
why
didn't-
did
I
he?
thought
Why did
about.
he? And why did
I
he go
thought
through that?
about.
Why did he go there?
Why
Why
did
not
They
think he
never
went
know.
there?
You
Why
don't
did
know.
Vince-
You're not Vince McMahon.
You know why he didn't go there? Because Dusty could have handled the pressure. Boom. I'm glad we had this talk. Now here's the thing, because we took too long on this, right? Dusty could have handled the
Dusty
pressure.
was bigger than
There's no
Terry Bollea
story
at the time.
There's no story. He didn't look good with the championship title. That's what it was.
Okay, I want to ask you this though. Since
ahead,
we're
go
on
ahead.
this topic of Dusty, right?
Yeah, go ahead.
You know, Vince was always like, this guy, he's got to be muscular, right? He's got to be huge. He's got to be a guy that guys want to be like, right? And women want to be with, right? This is his
Right.
champions.
Nobody want to be with a plumber? Look, all I'm saying is
So what
he
was
won the championship, right? The one that Cody alludes to all the time. Vince took one look at it and said, "No, this can't be 10 count." It's just how it is, right? So Dusty could have handled it, so we needed Hogan, and that's what Hogan came with his arrogant self. Said, "I can be the guy." I body slammed Andre a few times. Granted, hey, all respect for Hogan. He said, "Look, this part I already knew anyway." Andre, we didn't know if Andre was going to take the 3. Andre took the 3. Andre did business. Hogan did business, and then his ego got a little inflated. He got a little bit bigger, especially as he did Rocky 1, Rocky 1, Rocky 3. So, facts to him. Facts for that. Props to him. I said Rocky.
He only
3.
did.
EC,
No, I said Rocky 1. I mean Rocky 3 is what I said. Huh?
do you think that Vince didn't want Dusty because he was fat?
No, just a second. I think he didn't want Dusty because Dusty was not that guy and could have handled it. I think
And
that's what it
also,
was.
you know, Vince, like, because he's from the South but hates the South. This is like the most self-hating man, Vince McMahon. You find that out in this
I
documentary.
completely 100% agree with
Dusty has a heavy Southern accent. Do you think that also was
you.
like
Not as marketable.
not my champion?
Right. But granted, Dusty is one of the most popular wrestlers from that era, right? And still popular to this day. I mean, they still chant Dusty anytime they see Cody and he sheds a tear. Now, that being said,
In the South.
no. Dusty's loved all over, sir. No, we're not going to do that. We're not going to disrespect the
We're not
American
going to do
dream.
what? You've been disrespecting this whole entire panel.
I haven't
So can we
disrespected
move
him.
on
I told the
to
truth.
Episode 3.
Hold on, just a
You
second,
have.
just a second. The man didn't
No,
believe
sir.
in it, but who
sir.
started most of the stuff in WCW?
Ric Flair.
No, Dusty Rhodes.
No, that's
A
not
lot
true.
of behind stuff was Dusty Rhodes.
That's not true.
Who helped with NXT? It was Dusty Rhodes. Hold on, just a second. Do you not know?
Why you keep saying just a second for?
Because you're interrupting. I'm trying to tell you something. I'm trying to finish.
monologuing.
I'm trying to get control back of the show.
Hold on, just a second. You asked me on P&O
Well,
episode
can you
2.
go? You didn't have 15 seconds twice.
No, hold on, just a second. Let me
time's over.
finish. Just who started War Games?
Who created War Games? Dusty.
Jake the Snake.
Dusty Rhodes.
Who started War Games? I think it was Sting.
What's your point?
My point, I was wrapping it up because I thought
Your
you said I
point
went over
was
my
you just
time.
wanted to say something and make you sound like you were trying to put Dusty Rhodes down.
I didn't.
and
I no,
you're
no,
trying to-
just a
you're- hold
second.
on.
I just said
No, no, I gave you a
that we
second.
weren't going
Your
to
time was
disrespect
up.
Dusty Rhodes. Did I not say that?
And you were completely wrong. And you're trying to sound
Just a
funny
second.
about a
Nothing
dead
you
man
said was wrong.
about
Nothing
something you have no
you said
idea
I said was
about.
wrong. I didn't say anything wrong.
You did. You completely
Incorrect.
did.
Just a
You
second.
did
What
not-
did I say that was
if-
wrong?
If we're going to
What did I
speak
say
up,
was
if
wrong?
it's going to be an opinion, having an opinion and having a fact are two different
Just a
things.
second.
sir.
What did I say that was wrong?
Everything you said in the beginning was wrong.
That's incorrect. I'm sorry. Just
There
a
is
second.
no
Did
proof
Dusty
to
Rhodes
say
hold
that
the
he
world
did not
title?
take the role
Did Dusty
because
Rhodes
of
hold the
his
world
person,
title?
because he cannot
Did Dusty Rhodes?
shoulder it.
Just a second. All I want to know
I'm
is
not gonna say what do you
did
mean, just a
Dusty
second.
Rhodes
What does that even
hold the
mean?
world championship?
Episode 3
That's what I thought.
gave us the screw job episode. Most wrestling fans will have you believe we knew all about this story. I'm a wrestling fan who had no idea about Randy Richter and that happening. And it's odd because I saw that match. They play that match all the time back in the day when I was a kid on Prism, when they would go back and do the Boston Garden shows, and they would show the Madison Square Garden shows. So I saw that match before, but never paid attention that that's how it came out. That was in wrestling in the 80s. You just thought they just made a botch and they just moved on. So to get that early story, which to me, the documentary did a good job at putting little keynotes of the episode beforehand. And I thought that was pretty good because I did not know about the Randy Richter situation as far as the screw job is concerned. Venomous Vinnie, back to your takes on Vince's take on the screw job.
The screw episode 3, correct?
Yes, sir.
The screw job. I love the fact that we all know about the screw job, and we all have. There's always a little take on everybody's perspective about it. The things that I actually think was comical was the fact that the way that the punch was. We all know that Brett was pissed off at Vince for screwing him over for the title in Calgary. He goes into the locker room and knocks his lights out. And I know it's not a big deal, but I mean, you hear about, every side to it. I didn't know. Also, I didn't know that. I had a feeling, and maybe I missed the memo on this one. I knew that Shawn was in on it. I didn't know that Hunter was in on it, and I didn't know that Taker picked up on it. And I love how there's so how many documentaries now is there, or how many times have we?
Well, the dark side of the ring. I'm sorry. What was the one? I forget the title. The one
something of shadows.
Yes, the wrestling in the shadows. A lot of that was told in that story, right? And then even with the screw job recently, a couple years ago, they put out a documentary. It was in there as well. It's also in the Rivals episode. It's been a while now that people know that Hunter has done it, but if you didn't know, you found out then. How did it make you feel when you found out? Damn, Hunter, you too?
Yeah. I think I feel like there was so many more angles to it. There was so much new footage that I saw in this documentary that I have not seen before. And I've seen a lot of new clips of the screw job. And we, like I said, there's been so many documentaries about it, but I feel like there's so much footage that WWE has had in their archive that we have not seen. And I love that every time we put a documentary out, we see new footage because it's, you get tired of seeing all the old stuff and it's time to see some of the new stuff. And then also in this episode, correct me if I'm wrong, Mike Knox, was this about Scott Hall and Kevin Nash jumping ship?
No, this was about all that happening. Yes, so that's when they started to talk about the NWO coming to form and him not having, that tying. And he pretty much came out and said, which if you didn't know, I knew that part about, hey, we're going kind of belly up. WCW's kicking our ass right now. I can't afford to pay you, so I'm going to show you legally how to get out your contract, Brett, to go over there so you can take care of your family. And I will say this as a diehard Bret Hart fan who has the best there is, the best there was, the best there ever will be tattooed on my arm. Just like you saw on Randy Richter, just like we talked about Andre doing the job, Bret should have done the job. I've always said Bret screwed Bret. It doesn't matter. I think Vince says he says, that's my title. It ain't like you want it. I gave it to you. So if I say to you, it's not yours anymore, you're supposed to do that. I've always felt that way. And I've had, wrestling fans come out and go, well, no one said anything about when Stone Cold did it or Brock Lesnar did it. And we all bitch and complain. And especially if you listen to Mike Knox for 14 fucking years, I've always said, fuck them all. Sasha, all of them. Your job in wrestling is to do the fucking job or don't do the job. It's that simple. You don't want to bark like a dog? Then don't bark like a dog. You have a choice to say no. Right? It was supposed to go this way. I want him to win my title. No, not on my watch. Shawn can't win because I don't like how he does the business. That's not your call, Brett. With all due respect, I love you. Back to you, Vinny.
You know what? One thing I really wish they would have hit on because it kind of would have made sense. The fact that when Nash and Hall jumped ship over to WCW, they never brought up the fact that Jim Ross and Vince brought in these two Goonies to portray
The
these
fake
two.
Razor and Diesel.
Yeah.
It wasn't even worthy talking about them until
I
just
know,
now.
but
that's,
that's
like talking about Camacho.
It's not. But here's the fact: if you're going to talk about them, there was a part in the documentary where they talked about how Ted Turner thought it was comical, but he was getting mad that they were making fun of him in these skits. Well, it's the same exact thing with Razor or with Hall and Nash.
Fake Diesel becomes Kane. That's
Yeah.
the best thing he got out of that. He becomes Kane. All right.
I just people don't know how big these guys were until they left. Like Hall and Nash were. I mean, I know they didn't portray them in the company as these. You know, they didn't win the titles. I mean, like, well, no, Nash did, but Hall, you know, he only won the Intercontinental. I know they didn't portray these guys as like superstars, but it just comes to show you that when these guys jump ship and they go over to WCW, everybody thinks that they're a ploy. You know, this is just a setup by WWE, which really isn't. But when they left, a piece of WWE went with them. And I mean, the same thing with Bret. I mean, Bret, listen, I can sit here and say there's only a couple people in the in wrestling history that are technical wrestlers. Bret Hart was that guy. He didn't go in there and start using weapons or chairs or this or that. He got you with submissions. He got you with the upper hand of he's going to beat you in a wrestling way. He's not going to, you know, cheat or any of that. And that's how he was raised in the dungeon. I mean, those guys were raised to actually be technical wrestlers. And for him to not, you know, not forfeit, but not lose the title clean was just, I feel like was a coward way. And then, you know, Vince had to do what he had to do. I mean, was it the right thing? No. But he was going to eventually, I don't know how you could have, if Bret won, the only way I can see how it could have went down was if Bret went on Raw the next night and forfeited the title, which I don't think he was going to do. That's all I got.
Big Daddy Cool.
I want to say that Vince, another thing that Vince said during this documentary is don't sell. Never see them, never let them see you sweat, right? Essentially, right? Don't sell. And this was a heavy
quotables. Yeah, Vince had a lot of quotables in his thing to me. Yo, I'm sorry,
but that's what I'm talking about, Mike. Like this is what I wanted to see about. I want to see about Vince. I want to see Vince like be Vince, and this you get a little bit more.
Because I can't wait to talk about episode 4 and 5. Like that's where Vince to me comes Vince with the stuff with him and Shane. Like
yes.
So
and here you get a sneak peek, like when he can never look vulnerable, and so. I'm impressed by Vince. One, the screw job, it had to happen. I'm with you, Mike. I'm with you, Vinny. Bret screwed Bret. You were supposed to do the job. I don't care if you're from Calgary. Do the job. You're going to the you had Medusa throw the women's title in the trash, right?
You know.
You had Medusa throw the women's title in the trash. You ain't going to do that to my world title. Hell no. So by hook or by crook, I loved Vince's words. My pops taught me, if they don't agree with you, get them in the ring and settle it there. Fuck, that was brilliant. That's brilliant. That's the more shit I wanted in this documentary. Don't sell. He goes after the screw job. He goes to Bret's locker room and he's just. This is where I believe Vince is trying to be man to man. Hey, Bret, sorry, but business is business, right? Bret punches him in the face, and Vince walks out with a black eye and all like wobbly. Right. And in his mind, he's like, I can't look soft. So he tells the story, I'll let Bret get one in. Fuck out of here. There's no way that he's just like, all right, I'm going to put my hands behind my back, pop me. No way. Not any one of the guys that are in that locker room have told that story that way, except for one man, Vince McMahon. That's the only story.
My only problem with the story we've heard it several times, is every time I wonder, I know Sean feels bad now that he's a man of faith, but he always says, hand to God. I didn't know.
And then you have Bret's wife. Was it
But he
Brett's wife?
says, I met this man when I was 23 years old. I would have done anything he told me to do. So he told me to do that, and that's what I did. And so, like him or don't like him, I mean, loyalty's a motherfucker, and I value loyalty more than anything else in this world. Executive consulting, your take on the screw job.
One
I'm
more
sorry,
thing.
go back. Big
Sorry,
Daddy.
EC. Sorry, one last thing I wanted to
Cool.
bring up was Brett goes to WCW, right? So I think this
God.
documentary to me corrected one misnomer.
What's that?
The story that was told was WWE couldn't afford Brett.
Yes.
WWE couldn't afford this 10-year contract. Vince essentially tells you here that was bullshit, right? He tells you
No, he actually says I couldn't afford to pay him anymore, and the contract was hurting the company. To get the company to get that money off the books, go ahead and take this loophole. I thought that was brilliant business. But let me hear your perspective.
That's the story he says. But if you read it, if you speak Vince, and you put the other connecting dots together, the story, what I believe the story really is that he knew Brett's best days were behind him.
Stop.
And Brett, for 10 years, you got, at that point in time, Mike, you got 10 years of money to give to who? You're going to give it to Brett, or you're going to give it to Austin, or you're going to give it to Shawn Michaels? Who you give that money to? Bret Hart is the last guy you giving that money to.
I'm gonna vehemently disagree with you on that. Bret Hart was in his prime at that point. Him and Shawn Michaels had one of the greatest matches. That Survivor Series Screwdriver match was great. The WrestleMania match, I know he's not the biggest fan. The consultant's not up, but they had other matches. Bret and Shawn are 1 and 1A. Shawn's just a way better storyteller. But inside that squared circle, Bret was still in his prime. And I disagree with that 100%. Now, paying the part, at that point, Stone Cold wasn't Stone Cold to say, let me take the money from Bret to give to Austin. He wasn't Stone Cold at that point. He was not at that point. He was becoming Stone Cold at that point, but he was not over until the screw job happened. Vince became the billionaire boss guy, and that put Austin over.
Let's look at the timeline. Austin wins King of the Ring, 316. The next night, cash flow. Austin 316 shirts selling like hotcakes. You then get the match.
Hotcakes. Why don't I say like hot waffles with butter? I'm just
because hotcakes is everybody loves hotcakes.
Yeah, everybody likes hotcakes.
You already had the Austin match with Bret.
That to me put Austin over because of Bret.
That started the blood. Right. We talk about who went over and who got over. Yeah. And Austin did not win, but he did get over. So you got that, but Austin, his trending trajectory is up. He's going up. Bret going down. Bret was already a heel in the Attitude Era. Bret's best days of selling merchandise, the red glasses, the things to kids, that was before. That was before the Attitude Era. In the Attitude Era, Bret Hart was a heel. And he was a good heel. Probably the best work he's done.
I would probably say one of the best versions of Bret was during that time.
Correct. Where does Bret fit in the Attitude Era, if not a heel?
Nowhere. But at that time, also in wrestling, we talked about it, the lines got blurred. There were, to me, faces. I said it to this day. Faces and heels don't exist anymore. Everybody's tweeners.
But you said it yourself.
That's what made John Cena so great. That's what makes Sami Zayn so great. They're true faces.
But you said it right there. If you're banking on Attitude Era, and you got DX, you got Austin.
I get what you're saying. I get what you're saying. There's no proof for me to say that.
You said there's no future in babyface Bret Hart in the Attitude Era. Then why give him 10-year deal? Why?
Take the money from him.
Vince was convinced, oh shit, I made a mistake. And then he said, my dog, here's the loopholes. I need you to go see this guy, Eric Bischoff, and get out of my face.
Hey, go ahead and get these money.
This man, he had no faith in Bret Hart. He said, get out the contract and go see Eazy-E. Go ruin his company.
Did we just all get a matching picture here almost? Executive consultant who never changes his background in the office. Please take the floor on the Screwjob episode.
This episode was about one of the most controversial, pivotal turning points in world wrestling entertainment history. That
Would you say pop culture history?
No, that screw job was so impactful that it means so much to me today as a fan, as a man, to see just a blatant attempt to get a man's title back, a man's property back because somebody didn't want to do business. And I have a message if that person's watching. Wendy Richter, I can't believe you were that determined to hold on to that championship that you had to have Vince screw you out of that championship. Now, why did I say that? Because it's going to talk about the real screw job, and that's Bret Hart won, right? There's some things that Big Daddy Cool said that I had agree on. There's some things Big Daddy Cool said that I have to disagree on. Here's what I agree on, right? Or disagree on. Vince did not go in there and put his hands behind his back. I agree with you on that, right? But he knew he was going to get hit. They talked about that in Wrestlers with Shadows. Shane told him, everything like that. They knew it. Here's why I respect Vince so much. He said it with Wendy. He said, well, after I did it, I stood right back there so she knew what was going on and why.
Yeah.
When he screwed Bret out of it, he said, I want y'all to lie and not admit that y'all knew, and I'm going to be out there and I'm going to do it so Bret knows it's me. Right? Then after that, he could have went right after he got spat on, like which is very, very disrespectful. And I'll talk more about Bret in a second, right? He went to the back. When he was going to look for a fight, when he put his hands behind his back or up or wherever like that, he knew probably what was going to happen. He could have left. He had everything in the right mind to leave. He was surrounded by a whole bunch of wrestlers that I'm pretty sure would have pounced on Bret if he wanted them to, right? He did. He took it like a man and then left. That's where he earns respect. What else were you saying? Oh, here's where I disagree with Big Daddy Cool, but I somewhat agree with also. I don't believe Bret Hart's days were behind him. I do believe we were in a later part, but I think he was still in his prime. I think Bret Hart was a tremendous asset to WWE for a long time. I've always thought he was overrated, and I still think he's overrated. But a lot of my favorite matches involved Bret Hart. Not his matches with Shawn Michaels. But a lot of his matches I liked were his matches with Mr. Perfect, Owen Hart, and so forth. Now, that being said, Vince said, I can't afford to pay you anymore, and gave him the loophole. This is where I have more respect for Vince, because he still respected Bret Hart enough. He still had loyalty to Bret Hart enough to say, you know what, I know this might hurt my company for you to go, but I'm going to get you more money even still, because that's how much loyalty I have for you.
Just a second. What if none of Shawn Michaels and Bret Hart's matches were in your top 5? Mm-hmm. What's your top 2 Bret Hart matches? Because I'm pretty sure WrestleMania 12 with Shawn Michaels and Bret Hart was probably.
He hates it.
I hate that match. It was so boring. It was so boring. It was so boring. I went to the bathroom. I came back. Went to the bathroom, took a crap, and came back. It was still 0-0.
He's
Somebody
lying.
was like,
He's lying.
No, I'm sorry. This is God honest truth. I went to the bathroom. I just
saw Shawn Michaels say, hand to God, I did not know that was going to happen. Sorry, I cannot believe you right now.
Oh, just a second.
You were that young as a child that you went to the bathroom twice during that match. I don't believe that.
No, just a second. Go back and watch that match. Go to the bathroom.
Just a second, you're lying.
Just a second. I have no reason to lie.
Just a second.
Go to the bathroom.
This is about Vincent McMahon's documentaries on Netflix, not your late for Bret or Shawn.
Just a second. Do you not know that they had rest holds during that match?
What?
What?
They had rest holds in that match. Did you not see
Every
it?
wrestling match has rest holds.
I came back, but it's for an hour.
Okay.
It was an Iron Man match.
It wasn't the first ever Iron Man match. Like, it wasn't the first ever ladder match.
It's an Iron Man match.
It wasn't the first time Andre got slammed that they promoted. That's what promoting is about. Selling
Iron Man match
a story.
That was the first one.
That wasn't the first one.
I thought that was the first Iron Man match.
What was the first Iron Man match?
That was not the first Iron Man match.
Just a second.
I
want to know what was the first Iron Man
televised Iron Man match.
Oh, so what was the
just
first
a
Iron
second.
Man match? You know?
I've asked 4 times now. What was the first Iron Man match if it wasn't Bret and Shawn?
It was Ric Flair and Ricky Steamboat.
That was an Iron Man match. They just
it
went.
It was an Iron Man match.
Okay. Well, we're gonna fact check that, but I'm gonna go back to my point. November.
You said answer my question.
Can you hurry up?
November is when Vince and Bret decided to do that, right? However, he said he couldn't afford to pay Bret Hart. Anybody know Bret Hart's contract $3 million a year? Now, that being said, what happened in January? Does anybody know? I think it talks about it in this episode. The baddest man on the planet, Iron Mike Tyson.
That's episode 4.
Okay, well, it's going to go into this. Hey, Daniel's called me. It's going to go into this. $3 million was paid to Mike Tyson. Right? This is why I'm going to agree with Steve, but on a different level. Right? Vince says, I have $3 million. I can either pay Bret Hart or I can pay Mike Tyson. That motherfucker said, I'm paying Iron Mike Tyson. Brett, I'm going to help you out, though.
Now I believe that a lot more than I believe he was past his prime. And that does get us right into episode 4, the Attitude Era, the Monday Night War, the emotions, all that take place into this in this episode. And I will say this, that came out of this episode, because I know you guys may not touch on it, which was shocking for me, was the whole thing with Owen Hart in the ring. And to me, out of this documentary, this was the only thing that I thought, who was your publicist, Vincent Kennedy McMahon? Who's your publicist?
Out of this what? You said it. Out of this what?
Just a second. I'm speaking. That didn't, I thought he should have pulled it back, right? Because I never paid attention in that moment of the backstage promo with Jeff Jarrett and Deborah McMichaels visibly crying. I never noticed the blood that was in that ring from Owen falling from the rafters. For him to say, if I could do it again, I would still do the same exact thing. I don't care even if I died in that ring, if Shane died in that ring. I find that hard to believe. If his son had fell to his death in that moment, would he have continued the match? And again, today we're speaking hindsight 2020. We're thinking we're in a way more sensitive universe we are in now than we were 25 years ago. However, to him to say, I would not change a thing, I thought that was, for me personally, the only issue I really had with this documentary was him saying, hey, I'd have kept the same thing. But that also came in as, I guess I said something, Big Daddy Cool, you wanted to go ahead and pipe in?
Yeah, I just wanted to add something in, because I think that, yes, where that blood stain on the mat was the vicinity of where Owen dropped, the Blue Meanie, who was on the undercard that night, has already dispelled that was Owen's blood. He said that blood on that side was from a bloodbath. That the Hardys, the Blue Meanie, and
hold on, just a second. Vincent, I know you're talking to Dan the Man. I can hear his dumb ass in the background. Could you mute yourself, please? I'm trying to listen to Big Daddy Cool.
You picked him up on a show on speaker, Vinnie.
right.
My mic's off. What do you mean?
We can hear you. I heard him in the background. How do I know you? How do I know you on the phone with Damn the Man? He called me. Now. I didn't answer because we're on the air.
Off the whole time.
No, we can hear you.
But how do we hear you?
You might be on your computer, Mike.
But it's on the whole time.
Now it's on. It was off the whole time.
But we heard you.
The conversation.
How do I
don't know how you heard me. I don't know how you heard me.
We even heard that last night he got a rim job. All of it.
But even what you're saying there, and no offense, I've interviewed the Blue Meanie. I've been in wrestling rooms with him. Another thing I thought that was great at this documentary was the fact they said, and I actually had to screenshot and record it actually, because the guy said, the one thing I know about the wrestling business is don't believe nothing about the wrestling business. Don't believe anything anybody tells you and things like that. The Blue Meanie is fucking lying. And I don't know that to be true. That's my point. We don't know. Right? So even if that's wrong, even if he's correct, right? Let me phrase that. And if he's right, and that's not the blood stain in which they showed in this Netflix feature of McMahon, just to go back to that and to see that in today's world, dark or not, somebody would have recorded that, right? Because we have our phones out, right? So thank God we're in a different world and time. But I just thought he had a chance to say, okay, maybe I should have stopped that. You know what I mean? Even if you don't believe it, even if he thinks, fuck it, I'm still gonna go with the show. It's my money. I'm not refunding people. He should have said, to me, he should have still said it, but that tells you who this guy is. And I think that's some of the things that people are saying. My biggest take in this, and I'll give it back to you, Vinnie, to start the Attitude Era off, is wrestling fans have to know the difference between reality and perception. We got to stop putting our fanaticness, which is a fan, in front of your morals. wrestling fan or not, greatest promoter or not, he was a little bit of a dickhead. And I think, that's just my take on that. Venomous Vinnie, Attitude Era, Monday Night Wars, people bouncing from ship to ship, people dying, steroids, sex, rock and roll, and girls barking like dogs. What's your take on the Attitude Era?
There's a couple things to get out of this. It talks about talks about Shawn Michaels and his upbringing with the company, and then some of the stuff that he used to do in DX that potentially could have got him canceled or them thrown off the USA Network. Stone Cold's start and his feud with Vince McMahon was another big thing. And then the Mike Tyson thing I thought was, we all knew about Mike Tyson, but that was pretty much the start of the end of the Monday Night Wars, because when they brought in Mike Tyson, that was, how are you going to top Mike Tyson being the special guest referee or the special enforcer to Shawn Michaels and Stone Cold Steve Austin? Let's see what else. Yeah, and then with the whole Attitude Era, that is a time that we'll never ever get back. And that's what's so sad about the Attitude Era, is that particular time frame was done so perfectly that nothing today in wrestling society could ever touch it. There's nothing, not even your tribal chief, not even your Cody Rhodes and finish the story. None of that shit could touch anything that the Attitude Era did. And that's just my opinion. I know you guys might have other embettlements, and that's fine. But I do believe that was probably, besides the 80s, that was probably the best time for wrestling, with these two companies head to head, back to back. NWO and DX, you didn't know who was going to do what each week. And that was the best part of it.
Mike, you're
Big Daddy Cool, your take.
You guys have said a lot, so I'm going to see if I can capture everything. Mike, to your point earlier about Vince and not stopping the show after Owen dies, I see the it's not even morale, it's the ethics of wanting to stop the show. But there have been so many times in sports that things happen on the field that are like very morbid. And the NFL won't stop a game. NHL won't stop a game.
Not back then. They have recently. They have several times recently.
I don't know.
Lamar Hamlin got stopped because he went into cardiac arrest on the field on a Monday Night Football game in the second quarter, and the game was canceled. They've stopped games in the NFL right now for fucking lightning in the area, and they didn't do that 30 years ago or 25 years ago. The world has changed.
Correct. All right. So then the time has changed, but they still listen. They're not stopping games for concussions. You saw Tua the other day getting his life knocked out for
they replaced some, but concussions different than somebody's dying. That's my point.
We learned
Lamar
about
Hamlin
that.
Lamar Hamlin was said to be dying on the field, and they stopped the game. That was just a year and a half ago for the Buffalo Bills.
Fair enough, but listen, back then nobody was stopping nothing, right? Vince, his attitude again. He told you earlier, don't sell. So even if he does regret it, he ain't gonna let you know that he regrets it. He's not gonna go back. He even tells you, I got no regrets in life. I'll do it all
isn't
over
isn't that what you said earlier about wanting from this documentary was for him to be real and to be open about, so for me, that was I wanted to see a Vince McMahon that I never saw before. Maybe a more human side, the side that these fans, or not fans, but people who've worked with him know more than we will ever know, he's like a father to me, right?
Correct.
And in that moment, I think in today's world, it's, you just say, it's okay to say I made a mistake. Maybe I should have pulled back from that. But other fans would say, I appreciate the fact he stood 10 toes on, like what you're saying. The show must go on. So, it depends on where you side, right?
Right. I think you will see that Vince, I think he probably shows to select few. I think that Vince does exist, but when the camera's on, he ain't showing that. And it's unfortunate because that's the Vince that I think we all want to see. The ones that The Undertaker saw, the ones that Cena sees, all that stuff. I want to talk about the setup to Owens'
Free fall.
fall, right?
That's how they categorize it as a free fall from the malfunctioning of the vest. It wasn't their fault. They were not liable for it. That
Right.
came out to be true in court.
So I've heard that story since the jump. I was watching the pay-per-view live. I remember it being a teenager, but after watching this, and I don't know, I had to
Adult.
rewatch this a couple times.
You were grown. You were not a teenager.
I was a teenager. I was a teenager.
19?
I'll show you my birth certificate. I was 13.
Hand to God.
Just a second.
Just a second. My bad.
I heard all this stuff about the malfunction, the vest, and hey, it's an accident. And I don't know if this documentary played me or I picked up on something for the first time, because Vince, after Brett leaves, Vince does dog Owen Hart. He dogs him so much, and he puts him in this blue blazer gimmick, and he's pretty much become like the Wile E. Coyote of wrestlers. He was falling and tripping all over the stage. He was like a complete buffoon and a goof, a gaffoon.
Ooh, we're comparing words now.
Now I can see for the first time that the setup was supposed to be he dives down, and when he's about maybe, I don't know, ladder height, 6 feet high, 6 feet away from the mat, he unhooks and he falls on his face. I can see that was the setup from Vince. Whether Owen was in on it or not, we'll never know. But for the first time, I thought, holy shit, Vince really did kill this dude because he set up this joke and the joke failed.
Any other folks? Any other takes on this? I know you have more than just the fall from the Attitude Era. Nothing
From
else?
the Attitude Era?
Yeah.
Vinny, I disagree. I think the Attitude Era was, what you're not going to see is sex and violence in wrestling to that effect. But right now, what I think people forget about the Attitude Era was there was so many people that were over. DX was over. Austin was over. Rock was over. Everybody in that locker room was over. And you're seeing a lot of that right now, too, where Cody's over, Roman's over, Rhea's over, Damian Priest, sorry, EC, is getting over. And so
Damian Priest is not over.
Jimmy Uso, Jey Uso is over. You have a big pool
Jimmy's
of talent.
more over than Damian.
Correct. There's a large pool of locker room people that are over, and that is good for business. And the business is probably the best financially. It's better than it's ever been, better than the Attitude Era. But right now,
That's only because they're partnered with TKO. That's the only reason why.
I'm with you with that one, Vince. It's the market changed. That's like saying rappers today are better than what they were before because they're making more money. That's not necessarily fair to the
Little
point
Yachty is the best.
because money changes things. But executive consultant, because a lot of things happen in the Attitude Era. The good, the bad, the ugly. I would say this just in small takes. Attitude Era was an era we will never forget. It maybe have been one of the most famous eras, but I think people forget how much bullshit was also in the Attitude Era. If you go back and watch those shows, outside of the tops that were getting the big pops, it was a lot of bullshit in the Attitude Era. It's a lot of things today we would go, that's really kind of stupid, and it was taboo back then. And we were just excited to see something that wasn't on TV. They're saying because it was such a different WWE that we just was like, yes, you know what I mean? Executive consultant, your take, because I'm one of the guys who thinks ECW was extremely crappy wrestling, but they came out and had a few diamonds and all that rough that was there, namely Rob Van Dam and things like that. But your take on this executive consultant?
First of all, let me just say that it's not because of TKO. I think that helps. but they became a lucrative company. They've always been lucrative for the most part, but they started making record numbers as far as how much money they were bringing in on an annual basis during the Thunderdome, which was long before they sold.
That was the worst fucking time for wrestling.
You're speaking from a different.
That was the worst.
Listen to what I'm saying. I said from a financial aspect and from a financial point of view, their income started seeing more records during that era.
But
Whether you enjoy it is completely different, Vinny. I said
they're not selling tickets. Where's the records?
Let me put it from your perspective.
The pandemic was happening, Vinny, so people
you might
so much of everything.
You might expand to Davenport, Laspada subs, delicious subs, right?
Which should be somewhere. It should be in Davenport. No, should be in Davenport.
And get different people working for you, right? Shoot. You start making more money than Laspada's ever made. But I think the subs are shit now because you have a different way of doing things, right? Doesn't matter because you're making more money than you ever have. But from my aspect, your subs are shit now. You didn't like the Thunderdome era. I actually am a fan of the Thunderdome era. I know I'm in the minority of that, but
I'm with you. I think it's one of the best underrated eras. Without the Attitude Era, we don't get Roman Reigns. We don't get the Bloodline storyline. We don't get Bailey. We don't get the really emergence of Bianca Belair. We don't get Jimmy. We don't get the time that people were not allowed to in sports entertainment anymore to get the chance to not be in front of a crowd, to get over and let a crowd determine. Because sometimes a crowd can make or break your show. We all know that, right?
And this is beside the point. Let's get it because somebody reminded us we only have 15 minutes. I agree with that. So not to cut you off.
Just a second, but go ahead. It's yours.
Just a second. You sound like you had something to say.
No, I say just a
second. Here's the thing I have a problem with, right? This man that talks about like he's Bret Hart, right? I talked to Bad Guy Jack. Shout out to Bad Guy Jack, Big Pop Theory podcast, and he goes, hey, we talk about Bret Hart. Bret Hart, is a miserable human being. I'm sorry, Bret. You're a miserable human being. All you do is cry and complain about the same thing for the last 20 years. Yet, I can see why. Because you had some people with these little chaotic theories, okay? I don't think they were trying to bury Owen Hart. Now, I can't say for a fact, right? But if you look at what WWE and what they've done over the course of decades, they always play the fool of certain people before building them up. Right, I think Blue Blazer was I think Blue Blazer was on his way to winning the Intercontinental Championship at that time. I swear to you, I really do. Okay, you might not say that.
Who was going to beat the Gobbledygook?
Who was the Intercontinental Champion at the time?
Oh, I'm just joking.
Who was the Intercontinental Champion at the time? The Intercontinental Champion at the time was the Godfather. I think he was on his way to win the Intercontinental Championship. That time, the Intercontinental Championship was hot potato. You only had that thing for a couple weeks.
Go ahead.
He was going to win it. I can't speak on whether or not I think I see both sides. The blood thing is really what's going to set it off for me. If it was Owen Hart's blood, then yes, the show should have stopped. If it was not Owen Hart's blood, maybe I can see why you keep it going. I don't know if he would have continued. If it was Shane, I think he would. I think Vince is that type of guy. I think he would have. But whether from a moral standpoint, no. From a business standpoint, I somewhat understand why. So I want to talk about that. I mentioned that. What else I want to talk about? Stone Cold did a good job. Thank you, Triple H, for doing that stupid shit with the curtain call. And
thank you, got me over.
Right.
Thanks for fucking up your shit. Attitude Era, to close that part out of the Attitude Era, which I think wasn't spoke about in this documentary as much as I wish they would have done, is how popular they did get. We saw the magazine, or I had every one of those TV Guide covers. Remember, TV Guide should be a very big thing. WWE New York was a huge thing. I never got a chance to go. I wish I did, but I have my one Stone Cold Steve Austin Funko Pop, not Funko, what do you call it, Beanie Baby, and a glass that my wife got me because how big Beanie Babies were back then in the day. They were very, very over at that time because of the raunches, because they were so different than what they had been before in WWE growing up. Like I said, the good guys versus the bad guys, and they started to draw that blurred line. And we talk about Taker. We talk about Bray Wyatt. Vincent McMahon's character is the greatest character ever created, in my opinion. We can talk about Taker all we want to, but there's no Mr. McMahon. There's no Stone Cold Steve Austin. Because where do you go after 3-16? If not, fuck your boss, right? So I wonder what would have happened in that time, but I think McMahon should get just as much credit. The same way Hogan had to say to McMahon with NWO popularity, hey, you didn't just make me by myself. I had something to do with this. Your dad fired me for going to do Rocky. You hired me back. It takes two to tango. And that leads us into family business episode, which to me, this is the episode where I did not know as much. And I want to say about this one part, and I go to you first, Vinny, after this. And that's Shane has an idea. Vince doesn't like the idea. Over my dead body is what was said. Vince takes a fucking knife and says, you want it that bad? Then fucking kill me to do it. And two things here. If you did it, that means you want it. If you don't do it, that means you don't have the fucking balls to fucking pull it off. So fucking leave. And this is when we get Shane leaving the company. No one ever knows why Shane really had left the company. Excuse me. And to hear Vince put it that way, that let me know that Vince is about his company. This is my company, not yours. And I like the fact that Shane said, this is his company. It's not my company. It is his company. He can do what he wants to do. I thought for wrestling fans, I want to choose sides or this and other. That's family business. You will never understand family business. And when you own something, you know, I get in trouble out here on UPR, right? Of saying mine. I always mention to, you know, the boards and everything like, hey, it's just how much I love UPR. When I say mine, I'm taking it ownership, but it's legal. It's not mine. It's really executive consultants. At any given time, they can say, Mike, get the fuck out my company. And what am I supposed to say? You know, I want to stay in StreamYard because I got shit there. No, he can lock me the fuck out. Okay? It's that simple. So the fact that happened, and then the stuff with Stephanie taking over, I love who I thought was really the star of this documentary was, help me out. I can get you Tony Atlas.
Tony Atlas.
Okay.
Tony Atlas was definitely the star. And there's, you know, we don't have a lot of time.
So
There's so much to talk about in this thing because Tony Atlas has some killer lines.
Yes.
I know everybody's going to talk about
He was the realest. Besides Brett, he was the realest guy.
Was the realest.
I feel like he was the most honest. I think Hogan was somewhat still kissing ass because he knows what's going on with him. He wants to keep his
Tony ain't got nothing to lose.
Brett still says Brett still
he touched my
still sounds salty.
He said, so you should tell somebody. He said, who am I going to tell? To tell Vince what? That's Vince's guy. He would touch my pecker all the time.
He's like, you don't know the company. You don't know the business, do you?
You don't know the business. But what he said is that Shane was too nice.
Yeah.
And in business, if you understand, I always tell people this, everybody wants to be in front of the camera. Everybody wants to be the rah-rah. But if you don't put in the work behind scenes, then it doesn't matter what comes on scene. And you cannot always be somebody's friend. And I thought that was telling me. He said, Shane's nice. He's just Stephanie's more like her dad. It's about the business. And I thought those were intriguing things about this episode that I did not know that I thought was great to know. And even him coming back and the stuff with Linda being involved. And to me, this was the episode, like episode 1 with you, Big Daddy Cool, I agree, that gave me more insight to the family that I did not know, or if I did not know, heard it from a different perspective. And I love family business episode. That was one of the things that got to me. Someone to speak on that. Vinny, your takes on episode 5.
Well, two things I didn't know about this episode. I did not know that Shane was potentially trying to persuade his father to buy UFC. Had no idea about that. I did not know that UFC was in financial trouble and needed to be bought out. Didn't know that. And I did not know nothing about the lawsuit with Sable. I knew that part. I knew that Sable. I knew that Sable had she had a on-air segment with Vince McMahon, and then like 2 Mondays later, she was, I don't know, released or she left, and then the lawsuit was filed. And then she came back eventually. Which makes no sense to me.
They all settle.
I know, but here's the crazy part. This is the crazy part about these people, like Brett and all them, like Warrior and stuff like that. Like, to me, if I settle, I'm done. Like, I'm done. I'm walking away. I'm not going to come back. These people, I don't know what they have to prove after they leave. And they win a lot.
There you go.
I know it's money. I know it's money. But here's the thing. It takes a strong person not to come back for that money, no matter how much money you throw at that person. Because it's not about, it should be about respect and about how you walk on these people.
So like you're cool with Sasha Banks saying fuck them because, you know, I'm just saying.
I am the kind of person that if you fuck me over and then you're going to throw a bunch of money at me, I don't want your money. Because here's the facts. The facts that you've already made me look like a fool, and I'm stupid enough to come back and be made fool of again. You know, what's that saying? Once,
Fool me
twice up.
once, shame on you.
You want to do the real version? Or
Yeah.
you want to do George Bush's version?
Go ahead.
no.
Tell me what's the
Well,
consult.
George
what's the
Bush don't like
consultant
black
version?
people.
Okay,
Which
Kanye.
consultant?
Oh, not
version?
that one. Okay, I'm sorry.
No, I said George Bush's version, not my version.
Oh,
Fool
Well,
me
all right,
once,
what's
shame on you. Fool me twice. Never fool me again.
He said, "Shame on you again."
shame on you again. Yeah, that's what it was.
I did know I do know that Shane tried so hard to impress his father, and for him to eventually, one day step down and give him the control of the company, which we all knew that was never going to happen. And this is also the start of the ruthless aggression era, where Hogan's left, The Rock is left, and now they're in the ring, and they're trying, and who steps up? That I think it's what that.
And to me, Vinny, the greatest era in wrestling history to me was
What
the
ruthless
aggression era, because it had the best of the Attitude Era, right? The best of that era, not all the bullshit. The best of that era with that new crop of people like Brock, like Cena, like Angle. You had the WCW defectors at that time. It had all the best people at one time in the same spot, and we never got that since, and we haven't had it, again.
Okay. Well, I'm done. I know Steve wants to get in. I know Chris wants to get in. So go ahead.
Big Daddy Cool, family business.
Like you, Mike, I think that this episode you get a better idea of why Vince chose to sell the company instead of hand it down to Stephanie or even Shane. And you get a good look at where Shane ranks amongst the kids in the family. And I felt sympathetic to Shane after this episode. I even feel like if the rumors about him going to AEW are true, I think I might actually tune back into AEW just to pray that this man actually one-ups his dad and shows him, yo, look what I did, Pops, without you. The Paul Heyman comment about the story with like Over My Dead Body, right? Like if you want this, Shane should have taken that. And I don't think Vince meant it literally. I think Vince meant it metaphorically. And what Shane should have done was at that time, maybe partner up with his worst enemy. Eric was out at WCW at that time. Call up Eric Bischoff. Eric, UFC, find some money. Let's go. You and me. Imagine that. Bischoff, McMahon, UFC. They could have been TKO before TKO. And maybe in an alternative universe, that actually happened. But that would have stung at Vince and also gained his respect. In this episode, you also get to see the relationship of Vince and Stephanie. God, he loves Stephanie so much. And Stephanie loves her dad so much. Like, this is what, now it makes sense why when he came back to take over that second time after he retired, and she's like, oh, Pops is back. I'm going to just resign back into my leave. I can see why. Because she don't want to cross her Pops. She don't want to cross her Pops, even though she disagrees with a lot of his stuff.
Just a second. Hold on. I'm sorry. Hold on. You mean to tell me you think it's because out of respect that she did that?
Yeah. What are you going to think? What is fear?
No, I'll tell you my little quick thing real quick, and I didn't mean to interrupt you, but you were talking that nonsense.
Oh, go ahead.
So I think what happened was that the scandal came out. Vince was showing his ass on TV. He came on SmackDown, came on Raw. You remember those times in 2022? He was coming out there for no reason. There was no reason for him to be coming out. He was
Welcome
coming out
to SmackDown.
Right.
He said, I'm here.
Yeah, he just walked out. Everybody thought he was going to talk about the scandal. He said, hey, welcome to SmackDown. Then he walked back. That was Vince showing his dick. Let's just be real.
That's right. He put it on the table. Right.
Stephanie sat him down and said, look, you fucking shit up for us. You're messing up our public image. You need to retire. He was upset about it. He did it. Then he got bored. He said, you know what? I'm coming back. She said, if you come back, I'm leaving. Right? He said, okay, I'm not coming back. Then said, you know what? I am coming back. As soon as he came back, she left. And if you pay attention, she has not done anything business-wise since. Even though Vince has stepped down again, she's not a part of the business because she's done. She and Triple H broke up. I still don't care what anybody says. I think she and Triple H broke up. I don't think they're in a relationship anymore. I think they're just there for public image only so they can still have a McMahon for the company, but they are never together on screen outside the Hall of Fame, and they barely look like they can stand each other. I'm telling you what I believe. Not saying for a fact. I do not have any inside information on that, but I don't think she did it out of love. I think she did it because she was upset that he came back after. Because when he stepped down the first time, she came out there and she said, "Hey, I love you, Dad. Let's do respect." That was a public image saying, "Thank you for doing the right thing." Kind of like, I hate to go to politics, kind of like Kamala told Joe's ass to sit down so she can run for president. That's the same situation. Kamala.
Nah. When he resigns,
great last name. I'm going to call her Harris. Okay, Vice President Harris.
That's the future Mrs. Harris.
No, I tried every angle. I can't see anything attractive about her.
When he resigns the first time, she goes into the ring on SmackDown and she's crying. That's for her pops. This is again
because she thinks he's done.
The love that she's got for her pops, and I think she still loves her pops. Her pops is always her pops. But that don't, again, there can be both. And I think this is what ultimately this documentary shows you as we get, we're going to get into episode 6 soon.
And
there's many facets of Vince McMahon. He can be the Walt Disney to us. He can also be the villain. And he can also be this sexual deviant and a father figure to people. Like, he can be all of this. And it's just which one do you see? Which one do you see, and which one do you respect? I think there's black and white in everybody, right? Gray areas of our morality, some worse than others. And I'm not trying to make any excuses for his deviancies, but I mean, there's plenty of stories out there about Vince
are what they are
doing right for his people, for Eddie Guerrero, for all the guys that, I need a surgery. I need all these guys that got into drug problems. Even if you were out of the company, he will pay for you.
Well, just a second with that, because that does lean us into the last episode, right? The finish. And I think that's a big misconception there, Steven, Big Daddy Cool, because they were kind of forced to do a lot of those things. And before being forced, before accusation, after, accusal of sexual this and sexual that, improprieties this episode was not finished off. Vince at this point decided to stop filming because of the latest things that's come out in the news and whatnot. We go back to the CTA. They talked about the Benoit thing. I didn't know that Christopher Nowinski was the one behind it, that headed that whole thing. I was always led to believe it was whatever the Will Smith's character is from the concussion movie from the NFL that led that story. If you look at the timeline, they're more right. Christopher Nowinski did lead that story, who also left the ring from having brain damage. And them showing on the wall the difference between Benoit's brain to a normal brain. That started that whole ebb and flow process. Then at that same time, Vince, he didn't always help out guys like Scott Hall. They didn't help guys like Kamala. I said all the time, the very first wrestling podcast there was Ahmed Johnson's podcast, because it was brought to you by the best damn show on radio networks, Mike Knox. And we had Kamala on that show where they were not trying to help him with his injuries. They were not trying to help him with, he got his leg cut off. We go back as well to when Scott Hall first had his first big episode of Bout with Drugs. They did not help him out. Later on, when they introduced the wilderness policy, then that became a thing. The wilderness policy became a thing because it became better for business. This is where Stephanie McMahon and those other outside of the wrestling business implemented these things into the company to make the company look better on a bigger scale. I can't say on 1 second where the man says, if he dies, he dies, the show must go on, to say, well, all of a sudden I care if you're doing drugs. That's not how that, you can't care. He didn't care. He was forced. It was best for business. And we know that Vince McMahon does what's best for business to have a wilderness policy. on that take. But in this, all the accusations came out of the sexual impropriety, the cheating scandals. We've talked about this separately on the Shorts program. We had a special show about this, and Vince McMahon got when he found out the company. Chris and I did as well. And from there, I will go back to you, Venomous Vinnie, with this one. The end. He retires. All the trials and things that are going on right now. TKO buys him out. He's no longer in the company. He doesn't own the majority of the company any longer. He is completely out. This is no longer a family business. It is now just a company. Your takes on this last episode?
A couple things stick out to me. A couple funny things. The beginning of the show, he starts off with he has 3 sides to his brain. Okay, I don't know if you guys remember this. Do you remember this, Big Daddy Cool? Where he says, on one side, he wants to do the right thing. On the other side, he wants to do what the hell he wants. And then he says, the third other part of his brain, he can always tap into. So pretty much he's saying there's 2 sides of Vince. There's a good side, there's a bad side, and then there's oh shit, let's do this today. Another thing that stood out to me is Bruce Richards. They sat him down, they said, what do you think about the documentary? And he said, this is shit. He said that it's shit because you don't know Vince like I know Vince, and I didn't know this. So Bruce Richards' wife was dying, and he pretty much said, you're going to get the best doctors and the best treatment and best care because I'm going to pay for it. Now, we don't know Vince McMahon behind the scenes. Nobody does. Only the people that work with him, his family members, and the people that are close to him. So this documentary, the 6-part series on Netflix, it was a take and it was a stab. There were some great parts in this whole documentary. Also, in this documentary, you had the women's revolution. They talked more about that. They talked about Shane coming back after 7 years and facing The Undertaker at WrestleMania 32. And then it breaks down of Vince McMahon's a horny old bastard man that can't keep his hands off of the women in the wrestling organization. And Linda McMahon's not giving him any, so he has to get it somewhere else. I mean, that's what I got out of it. I mean, what else is there? He pretty much
said my sexual. He mentioned multiple times, I got a sexual appetite.
Here's a question I have for all of you. After watching this last episode, I come to realize and think, all these guys say they look up to Vince. Vince was a father figure to me. Vince was this. Vince was that. What do you think these guys are seeing now? What do you think they're seeing now after knowing these allegations of these text messages and this woman that potentially rode the train on with Laurinaitis, and Brock Lesnar threw the F5 in there a couple times with her? I mean, we don't know anything, but they try to ask John Cena, and Cena wanted no part into it. They asked The Undertaker, but this is way before. That was 2021. But these guys, I mean, I know they're going to still deep down inside love Vince McMahon, but you have to understand when you start talking about somebody that has allegations like this and you start portraying this, that's when it tarnishes your actual, your reputation in the business. So a lot of these guys are going to stay out of it because do they still love Vince? Of course they do. They're never going to stop loving Vince. They probably don't love what Vince did, but they're not gonna talk about it. That's all I have.
I thought that was a very good take, Vinny. Go ahead, Big Daddy Cool.
To answer your question, Vinny, I think John Cena answered it best. He was on Howard Stern and he answered that question. Howard asked him just that, what's your thoughts on Vince McMahon? And he pretty much, I'm paraphrasing here, but he summed it up to listen, let's say you have a family member that's like your dad or your mom, and they got vices. They drink a lot. They swear a lot. They were abusive. They're still your pops. They're still your moms. And somewhere, despite the vices, you still have this, what do they call it? This not undying love. This just kind of like this love that you got there, right? And I think that sums Vince up. I think this episode 6 was the worst one of them all because they just leaned into the trash. And again, I go back to what I said about episode 1. You got a chance to sit down with this man and you can get into his head. Like this documentary could have went into, so Vince, tell us why you booked Mega Powers the way you did. Hit me up with that. Like, give me the stories. This was a timeline of the WWE history. And yeah, sure, you had like a lot of news, salacious stuff, but you could have asked the man, the mastermind behind all your greatest creations, Hogan, Macho Man, Austin. What were you thinking? What were you thinking? Like, that's the best stuff. That's the meat and potatoes. They totally glanced over the Thunderdome stuff. Bro, COVID happened. How did you pivot to Thunderdome? You didn't bother to ask because they wanted to just do this. I want to hear from a business perspective. Bro,
You're right. They didn't do that. That was a big shocker to me.
Right? You didn't stop. COVID shuts the world down. Did you ever think about stopping? And Vince's answer would have been, hell no. Show must go on. Not for a second. And then I want to hear the story of like, how quickly could you pivot? Like you could have done a whole episode of that. And how do you continue telling the stories? What's the rough part about the talent not being able to have the audience? Vince tells you in this documentary, listen to the people and they'll tell you where to go. Now you don't have that. So how do you get that back, Vince? Are you looking at Twitter? Are you looking at social media? We could have got that. We didn't get that opportunity, right? It's so many missed opportunities just because they wanted to just live in this salaciousness that Darkside's done. Everybody else has done. Hundreds of podcasts have done this on Vince already. And it's been done. The one difference is you had the man right there in the center of the ring. And you chose to tell this story because in my mind, I honestly think Netflix and TKO were like, bury Vince McMahon because we don't want him to come back. And this wasn't like the final nail in the coffin of Vince McMahon. I can see a world where he comes back. I think an interesting question, and I pose this to you is to all of you is, if Vince were to pass away tomorrow, is he memorialized on TV? And in what capacity? And is that different today or tomorrow versus 5 and 10 years from now?
I would say yes. All of it, yes. It'd have been different from 4 or 5 years ago. I think they still, to some point, would have some kind of responsibility to the wrestling fans. I think without being said, all of this, he's never been found guilty of anything. And this country was stolen, and this country was founded. And he said about it in this document out of his own words. You lie, you cheat, you steal, you do what you got to do to get your business over. So what a person does in the privacy of their own home is their business, in my opinion. Now, what they do on TV, you do have a right to the audience. The world has changed. Unfortunately, we do not live in the Archie Bunker world we used to grow up in. Most of us grew up in. It's a different world. Now you have responsibility to the audience before you. So I think that does change. Executive consultant, your final thoughts on the finish.
I think Steve, my partner there, talked a whole bunch of nonsense, and here's what I say that for. Yeah, I'm going to say that. The beginning of this series, they said Vince sat down for an interview, and when he sat down for an interview, midway through or halfway through or whatever's way through, the scandal broke out, and he left, and he declined to do any further. We don't know what they had planned. They could have easily had planned to go into the Thunderdome era or any of the other things. Now, I can also tell you, I know this one for a fact. I do have inside information. He refused not to go further when it came to COVID and everything else shutting down. He refused. He called in a few favors and got to stay on while everybody else had to stay off. But that's Vince. And he found out from Owen Hart. He does not believe. He believes the show must go on.
Hold on. Add a little more context to that, EC. What do you mean by that? Like when it came to being in the COVID era, like March 2020,
people owed him in buildings. He called in some favors. He put some loopholes in effect where
went to Florida.
6 feet, Right.
He was already in Florida.
Right.
But he made sure that that was the base of operations.
Yeah.
In order to make it
because
work.
things were a lot looser there, right?
Right. And you know what? I'm going to go even further. I'm going to talk about it. You asked the question about being memorialized. I don't think he would be. And I think that's a damn shame. Because they have to respect their public. I understand why, right? From a business aspect. Everything I say is business, right? Vinnie always talks about from a fan's perspective. I talk about from a business perspective. I understand why. Mute yourself, Mike. Mute yourself, Mike. All right. That's okay. You know, Vince had a whole conversation with Dan on the air, and then he was over there making love to his dogs. Now, that being said, you know, I understand, but this documentary, and this is one thing that I hate to say the man was right. Dice suggested we do this in like 6 parts, and maybe he's right because there was so much to cover. Even though there was a lot of information that everybody already knew, there was so much to cover because what Big Daddy Cool did say was completely correct was this wasn't really just about Vince McMahon. This was almost like a timeline completely for the WWE. This is how it started. This is where it ended up, right? I think one of the this is mostly for you, Venomous Vincent. One of the people that they interviewed, one of the reporters said, hey, the Attitude Era was the peak of their popularity. And that is right. I would never debate that. That's when you can go everywhere, everybody knew it, and they were all over TV and stuff like that. But he also said, but they make more money now. And I can tell you from those bad blood ticket prices next week that I'm supposed to go to, $275 for the lowest freaking ticket. I do not understand how In Your House pay-per-view has $275 tickets. Yes, I still call In Your House pay-per-views.
Have you seen how much the Survivor Series took this off?
But Survivor Series is the big 4. That's different. I'm talking about bad blood.
$1,400 to sit way in the top of the stadium, and that's where, as a wrestling fan, TKO can kiss my ass.
But the thing of the matter is, unless nobody shows up and it looks like an AEW Dynamite episode, they're still going to do it. Because despite everything that came out, Vince sat here and said, hold on just a second. Vince sat here and said, statute of limitations has ended. Vince said, hey, I think I had a storyline where I was going to impregnate her.
Horrible.
You know, he said stuff like that. He said the show must go on. I didn't know he had so many interviews. Okay. Growing up at that time, I had no idea Vince was on TV that much, having that many interviews. Right. But one of the things I would say, Vince was a scumbag, but he was a chairman and a CEO. And I dare you to find too many companies, even in religions, where you are not going to find a scumbag and a CEO. You open up that closet, you're going to find all types of nasty little stuff that they have done and all these types of legal stuff they would have done. Vince just finally got caught. And let me tell you something. For the fact of the matter is, all this stuff that he was going through and all the stuff that he saw, where you really thought he should have been down and out, he survived that long. More power to you, Vince, but you are a scumbag. However, at the same time, as much as I don't respect, listen to what I'm saying, I don't respect some of the stuff that he's done, and I have a problem with a lot of stuff that he's done. If No Chance in Hell plays on Monday Night Raw tomorrow, and I was in that crowd, I will be doing this as well. Because at the end of the day, the reason why we are all friends to this day, myself and Big Daddy Cool, myself and Venomous Vincent, myself and Mike Knox, even my roommates, is because a wrestling company became bigger than what it ever should have been and became a fabric, as Mike Knox said earlier, of Americana. And that is because of one man at the end of the day, and that man's name is Vincent Kennedy McMahon. You sick freak. 3 brain. That's my take.